Okay, great. I just want to say thank you to the attendees. We have kept this event focused on a smaller group because it's a very specific scenario that suits our customer needs. But we're delighted to bring our partnerships to the fore here. We have Microsoft and Dell working alongside us to help really demonstrate the capability of having a hybrid approach to your compute needs. And really, are we moving on to the next slide and we can do some introductions? So my name's Irfan. I'm head of cloud and AI and work closely with Dell and Microsoft on helping our customers provision the right solution for their needs. And a lot of cloud and hybrid solutions I work very closely in. So I'm looking forward to showing you how Jungle can help in your journey. I'm move on and introduce Lisa. Do you want to? I'll let you jump in yourself, Lisa, and just say hello from here.
Amazing, thanks. Hi everybody, good to have you here. My name is Lisa Clark and I work in a pre-sales specialist role here at Dell in our EMEA multi-cloud team. I'm a 6-time Microsoft MVP, so I focus all my time and attention on the Azure hybrid world and how Dell and Microsoft work together to bring solutions like Azure Local to customers.
And finally, Darren.
Thank you. So
loving the background, by the way. That's a cool background.
Thank you very much. So I'm Darren Kunishura, an Azure Product Marketing Manager. So I'm here to essentially evangelize everything to do with Azure from on-prem to the cloud. And nice to meet everyone.
Great. We've got a question. Will the recording be shared? Yes, it will. We'll be doing that at the end and giving you the details how to access it. Okay, moving on. So we're handing over to Darren to kick off.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you for joining us today. So today's session, introducing this webinar, we'll be talking about overall, what is Azure Local, what are its capabilities, why you should use it, before we deep dive into some of the tangible next steps and solutions, not only through Dell, but also through Jungle as well. So, as I'm sure you're aware, not all workloads are cloud ready. And, as we've evolved in the cloud ecosystem, we've found that not every workload is in the right place at the right time. And we'll see that, across 4 key scenarios, we're seeing more and more that customers are looking for alternative deployment methods for these applications and workloads. So whether it's latency sensitive workloads where millisecond latency, sub-millisecond response times are required. Sometimes it's due to policies, regulatory compliance, even sovereignty. And sometimes you're looking at high performance inference at the edge. So this is where you might be looking at not only looking at live camera feeds for computer vision, thinking about object detection, but that needs the best performance localized to not only where the use case is, but also the users that might use it. And then we think about business continuity. So providing increased high availability, disaster recovery functionality, while also providing that continuity in terms of workload runtime. So if we think about one of the concepts that Microsoft definitely is a strong vendor in, it's the adaptive cloud concept, which is different deployment methods for different applications, all centrally managed, deployed, and hosted through a suite of Microsoft technologies. So we can see we've got public cloud where you're looking at public only. We've got IoT where you're looking at high volume throughput of devices, sensors. We've got hybrid where you're mixing a bit of on-premises and the cloud. And then we've got multi-cloud approaches and edge. So I think the differentiator for Microsoft in this scenario is we provide the tools, the hosting platforms, and the governance and security frameworks to be able to manage all of these types of systems. So today, we're particularly focused on hybrid and edge scenarios and how you can use that to create a seamless operating model with any public cloud environments as well. So when we look at Azure Local, so this is the concept I'll introduce, which is not only utilizing physical hardware, which we'll hear from our partners at Dell a bit later in this conversation, but it's about bringing the power of Azure and its management plane on premises to enable you to not only provide cloud management to on-prem resources or run localized workloads purely on dedicated hardware, but still maintaining the look, feel, and operational stance from Azure. So if we have a look right now, we've pretty much got two application hosting methods that we support in Azure Local. So we've got our containerized workloads with Kubernetes and AKS on-prem, and then we have our infrastructure as a service or virtual machines also provided on top of Azure Local. So all utilizing the commonly understood hypervisor Hyper-V. We're also providing our software-defined data center capabilities of defining not only logical compute, storage, and networking, but management of that. Now you'll see that we've got an extra layer which says it's enabled by Azure Arc, and this is our cloud-based management control plane. So if you're looking at connected Azure Local, which means it's connected to the Azure portal, generally what will happen is you use the Azure portal as the control plane and reach into the data center to manage your resources, which means you can configure and deploy a virtual machine from the Azure portal, which actually will get provisioned on-prem as well. Now, if we look at the key services that you can see across the Azure Local stack, you can see it has a combination of cloud management features, as well as app hosting features, data storage features, as well as some interesting ones like Foundry Local, which we'll speak about a bit later. So talking about where Azure Local wins. So we'll go through this in even more detail later in the session. But as you can see, when you're thinking about traditional on-premises choices versus cloud, you're really thinking about maintaining that local control. And that local control is still present in Azure Local. When you're thinking about cloud management, you're not able to get a single pane of glass to see your entire infrastructure across multiple different deployment types, but that is something you can still maintain with Azure Local. You think about AI capabilities, and generally it's a manual setup to get AI models on premises running in a performant way. And obviously in public cloud, that's fully native, but on Azure Local, and some of the things we'll talk about later, you'll see that we're bringing AI to the edge as well. And then we think about unified DevOps of how to actually build and deploy applications still on-prem. It's a very manual process. When we think about public cloud, we think about templating, infrastructure as code, and all of those concepts still apply with Azure Local. And then we think about disconnected operations, which is really easy to achieve with on-premises, obviously incredibly difficult with public cloud, but Azure Local also gives you that functionality. So generally, the way it works is you acquire a hardware from a validated platform vendor such as Dell. You provision the Azure Local software on that configuration, and then you deploy the key workloads and services that you want to, and then you manage it centrally via either the disconnected management plane or the local plane. So just to show two different deployment methods. So if you are in a situation where it can be connected, you do get options of slightly more workloads, because now you can use the power of the cloud on-prem as well. If you are using it in a disconnected scenario, you do get access to a few less workloads, but all the core workloads are there, including Foundry Local. So just a brief summary. So generally, when we're looking at disconnected operations, the main one that you'd be missing is AVD and Defender. So the ability to run virtual desktops locally and running security through Defender for Cloud won't be available, as well as Copilot that you can use on-prem through Azure Copilot won't be available. So just to cover some of the key workloads, just to wrap up on some of the interesting things that you'll be utilizing. So obviously the core workload is virtual machines, and this behaves pretty much like you expect through the Azure portal, through the CLI, and also ARM templates or even Terraform templates that you might use, but you can still replicate the operational practices that you would use in the cloud, but on-prem as well. Obviously, the other main thing beyond virtualization is containerization, where we even reduce the unit size of application deployment even further while maintaining isolation. You can actually deploy container-based applications natively on Azure Local as well through our managed AKS clusters that you can provision on-prem. And same thing applies, it still benefits from all the automation activities through infrastructure as code, as well as GitOps support as well. And then one for the connected only scenario, but like you can see, and access Windows 11 and 10 with very low latency, using your own dedicated clusters, but still managing the cluster from the cloud. This gives you the ability to use really a latency, high performance workloads. Sometimes when you're thinking about simulations and modeling applications or CAD software, this works really well at delivering that cloud on-prem capabilities, but at machine speed on-prem at the same time. Now, M365 Local is a relatively new one for us, but this is exciting in terms of ensuring collaboration in even disconnected scenarios. So if you imagine delivering Exchange server, SharePoint server, and Skype for Business server on-prem, fully managed, fully deployed on local, you can maintain collaboration even in network sensitive or disconnected environments. And then we come to AI at the edge. So you'll see that across our AI stack and solution, we've got Microsoft Foundry, which is the public cloud hosted model library to deliver frontier models as a service directly to your applications, providing it for agents and core applications itself. You'll see that we've got Foundry Local by itself, which is for local running of models on either Windows, macOS, or Android devices. And that's generally for personal development. And then we have Foundry Local on Azure Local. So this is more the enterprise grade models that you can provide on-prem catalog, as well as doing inferencing on-prem with high volume data sets with GPU enabled compute that you can do through Azure Local clusters themselves. So just to think about how it works, obviously you've got AI optimized hardware. So, regardless of the legacy or generation of your hardware, it will support CPUs, GPUs, and the newer NPUs to optimize the processing of these AI models. You'll see that right now we're offering a lot of smaller models on-prem, including third-party ones like OpenAI and Meta's. But also you'll see that through the roadmap, we're also trying to bring semantic modeling on-prem as well, which you can currently do in Foundry in the cloud, and also bringing you new tools and new agents to optimize the development experience of models even on-prem. And then here's just a quick view of some of the models, the open source models that we do offer, including ones from ourselves, as well as OpenAI and DeepSeek overall. So that was a quick wrap up of what Azure Local is and some key features. I think one of the things to potentially be excited about is to enhance the application development lifecycle. We're also looking at bringing GitHub Server to Azure Local as well, which also allows you to manage the application lifecycle not just the hosting of applications. And now I'll pass on to Dell and Lisa to discuss why private cloud and why now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, cool. So there's a lot going on in this space, a lot of exciting stuff coming out from Microsoft, and some of those more recent capabilities around Azure Local have perfectly timed with a lot of things that we are doing at Dell as well. And so I'm going to try and explain a little bit about what we've been doing and how it's kind of synced really nicely with some of the additional capabilities for Azure Local. And I'm going to cover basically our two offerings when it comes to Azure Local. The most recently announced Dell Private Cloud for Microsoft, which launched just in June and is based on our new Dell automation platform, which I'll cover very briefly here. And then, of course, we have our AX nodes, which is our Premier Certified Hyper-Converged offering for Azure Local as well. So let's just get stuck into it. In terms of what Dell have been seeing in the marketplace, it kind of falls into these three categories. Some of these are not new to us, right, in the IT world, but first and foremost, hypervisor uncertainty. So I like to term this the Broadcom shenanigans. I'm not entirely sure if that is okay to say, but ultimately I have spoken to more VMware customers in the last 2 years than I have in my entire 10+ year career in this space. What happened with VMware and Broadcom really shook things up in the hypervisor world. And so we've seen a lot of uncertainty in that area. We've seen a lot of customers looking to move hypervisor. We've had a lot of customers look to how do they de-risk from this happening again in the future. And so that's definitely been happening in the background. And we have come up with a little bit of a way to de-risk that when it comes to your hardware investment, and I'll come on to that in a minute and how we've gone about that. The second thing we're seeing, of course, is across the entire market is with the rapid growth, right, of AI, data centers, etc. There's an unprecedented, I'm not a fan of that word, but it is true in this case, demand for high performance memory and storage. And this is leading to rising costs across the supply chain. No one is getting away from this, unfortunately. And this is causing a lot of problems, right? So again, customers are looking for, okay, how do we avoid that potential lock-in when it comes to the investment of our hardware in the future in case things change again? How do we also be the most efficient, right, that we can be in terms of our hardware purchases, and again, try and insulate and de-risk those budgets from the volatility that we're seeing in the market right now. And then we have, a topic that I feel like every couple of years I have spoken about that just doesn't seem to go away. It kind of gets better and then it gets worse again. And that is management and automation silos, right? Or silos of any kind within our technical teams. So we have kind of two extremes. Some organizations have multiple overlapping tools and frameworks that don't really talk to each other, or still require very heavy manual processes. And both of those create, fragmented operations, inconsistent policies, all of that kind of thing that just inevitably slow us down. And this is not a time to be slow. This is not a time to be slow in this. It's never a time to be slow in IT, but it's definitely not a time to be slow now. So these are the kind of background, the background to what we have been working over on the last few years. So let's get into that. The Dell automation platform, relatively new in terms of a branding and a name, but it's definitely not new in terms of the underlying technology. So we have been on really a decade-long journey here, and it started with the procurement of Cloudify. You guys may have remembered that and thought, hey, wait, what did Dell do with that? Well, we were heavily embedding that into our systems. We didn't want to just take that off the market, chuck it back out to customers and say, hey, have this. We have embedded this into our systems, our supply chain, the way we operate. And then what we've done is we have used it to build on by making, further acquisitions. You'll see Moogsoft there, very much around inventory-based capabilities. And we've packaged these all together to deliver what we now have is the Dell automation platform. And it is this Dell automation platform that is going to allow us to address those three areas that I spoke about at the beginning. So I'll come on to what the Dell Automation Platform is in a second, but ultimately we have three main areas of outcomes underneath that. So we've got the Dell Private Cloud outcome that we're going to dive into today. We've got a Dell AI Solutions outcome there as well. And we've got our own Dell Distributed Private Cloud outcome there as well. Originally started as Native Edge and has recently expanded to become a pretty exciting area. As we go into this year, what we're seeing is, of course, right, some agentic AI capabilities coming on board to really wrap around what we've done here. So with the Dell Automation Platform, what is this? Ultimately, this is based on our main acquisition of Cloudify, along with some others. But what we have here is a different way of doing things. So let's think back to what I said at the beginning. We want to de-risk customers' hardware investments, right? Prior to kind of a couple of years ago, the way we worked is we would co-engineer really tightly with the likes of VMware, Microsoft, Nutanix, Red Hat, etc. Right? We would co-engineer really, really tightly with our partners. We would bake in our support, our lifecycle management, etc., into our hyper-converged platforms. That would also be baked into our supply chain management, our support lines, etc. And it was a great success. We've seen huge success in the HCI market in all of these areas, and it worked well. When did it not work? When we had hypervisor uncertainty. All of these things were what we call bound in factory, right? And that really limited us and our customers being able to be flexible and move when things like this happen in the market, right? So what we've decided to do is we have decided to take a new approach. And we're actually going back to the world as disaggregated. And so we're taking all of that lifecycle management, that co-engineering, that work that we did, and instead of binding it within a hyper-converged solution, we are automating it through infrastructure as code and through something that we call blueprints, which the Dell Automation Platform runs on. And what we are now doing is we are allowing customers to invest in compute and in storage, and then choose the outcome that they want to run on that themselves, and allow the flexibility and almost step out of the way as a hardware vendor, get out of the way as much as we possibly can to allow them to change should they need to change. So the portal itself, really powerful in terms of infrastructure inventory and observability. And we're going to see a lot of sort of agentic IT ops coming to that with our AI ops. But what's really cool about this is this doesn't replace anybody's automation tools, right? Remember when I talked about silos and people using different tools? You can hook into our blueprints, our infrastructure and code in the back end. But what this does, and it's really powerful, is, you know, things like Ansible are good at automating your workloads. Things like Terraform or other products are good at automating your infrastructure, but you have to tell them what you have, right? When your Dell compute and storage are showing up as assets within our Dell Automation Platform, within your portal, you get observability first and foremost of what you have, but then these things become, and I don't know if I've made this word up, but automatable, right? And then you can use those assets that you have and you can deploy outcomes to those. And so one of those that we're going to talk about is the Dell Private Cloud. So you've got the portal, which has got a catalog of outcomes, your inventory, assets, etc. And then you've got the orchestrator piece, and that is the piece that will run those blueprints that we have automated around lifecycle management and day-to-day operations. So really, really cool offering. And what this allows us to do is, next slide, is offer our Dell Private Cloud offering. And so what this is, like I said, it's based on Dell PowerEdge servers and Dell storage offerings. And what this means is you can go ahead and you can consume Dell Private Cloud outcome for lots of different flavors. And obviously the one that we are and I'm most excited about is the fact that we now have this for Azure Local. And this really came about perfect timing because in April earlier this year, Microsoft announced that for Azure Local, you can now have external storage, right? So up until that point, you could not attach external storage to Azure Local. It's hyper-converged based on SCD. I will caveat that to say that 3 years ago, Dell were the only OEM who worked with Microsoft to co-engineer, allowing us to attach our PowerFlex storage. So we've been here, we've done that before, we've proven it with Microsoft. We've kind of helped this roadmap item. And so now we're bringing more of our storage offerings towards this. What does this mean? It means that a customer can procure compute and they can procure storage, and then they can choose, it gives them choice and flexibility on the flavor that they want to run. Obviously, we're here today to talk about the most exciting one, which is Azure Local, but should a customer be stuck in contracts with another vendor right now, but only for maybe a period of time, it means that they can potentially go down this route to provide a solution for that hypervisor with the view that they want to move on to Azure Local in the future. Our licenses for Dell Private Cloud are attached to compute nodes. They're per node, they're not per core, and they are fully movable. They're not attached to an outcome. So we've really done our best to get out of the way in terms of kind of binding all of those services together. Next slide, please. So for Microsoft, for our Azure Local outcome, what does this look like? So today it will be our 16 and 17 gen servers that you can procure, Intel based. We have AMD based servers on the roadmap, which is exciting. And it's based on our Dell PowerStore solution as well. And so what does this mean? Well, so I should clarify that when Microsoft introduced the ability to attach external storage for Azure Local, it now means there are options. We love options. Sometimes they get confusing, but they are good. So you can either deploy Azure Local in a hyper-converged format and then add external storage after the fact, or you can deploy an external storage only format. And that is the format that is used on our Dell Private Cloud. Why? Because it allows that maximum level of flexibility for the customer. And that's really what we're committed to with the Dell Automation Platform and Dell Private Cloud. The really exciting thing here is we have seen customers, you know, when Azure Local first came out, it was very much pitched at the edge of retail, at manufacturing, and it's done really well there. We have seen it grow steadily in data center adoption over the last few years. And sometimes there is when hyperconverged just isn't quite the right fit. So customers might not need a high compute, but they need more storage. They might need to expand storage later down the line, but not necessarily expand their compute and memory. And hyperconverged, whilst, you know, we've reaped the benefits and saw the benefits of that for the last few years, that is where it kind of becomes a struggle. And like what I said in terms of market volatility and the price increases right now, it can make that situation really sticky and really difficult for a customer. When we do this disaggregated offering for Azure Local, it keeps that flexibility. It allows you to get some great efficiencies in terms of your storage. We now offer, it says 5-to-1 DRR guarantee there on PowerStore, but as of, I think, Dell Tech World in May, that's now 6-to-1. That's actually financially backed by us as well. So we will guarantee a DRR rate with you. And if for whatever reason it doesn't meet that, we will ship extra disks to make sure that it does. And that's what our Dell Private Cloud for Azure Local is based on, which opens it up to a whole new set of customers and customer needs. And they don't need to be huge needs either. We've done some maths in the background, and as soon as you're hitting about 3-4 nodes on a hyperconverged and you're hitting about maybe 40 terabytes, looking at a disaggregated infrastructure, you are very likely to see some lovely cost benefits, which is what we want in today's world. Next slide, please. Now, I have mentioned before that we do still have our hyperconverged offering, and we love our Dell AX system for Azure Local. It has done us very well in the last 6 years of Azure Local, and so we still have that for customers where hyperconverged fits and makes sense for that customer. We still offer that, and technically you can go ahead and you could add a PowerStore to your AX cluster as well. So we've got some customers who've been running in this format, but are starting to see a need to do, you know, to increase storage, but not necessarily compute and memory. Also really exciting for, you know, when these new AI capabilities come down and just having a bit more flexibility on that storage side. And yeah, just being able to be a little bit more efficient in that area. Next slide, please. And so this is just to finish on to say, look, we tend to go through cycles in this industry, right? And we take the learnings from one cycle and we move them to the next. I have spent my entire career in the hyperconverged world. And so we learned a lot there. We learned a lot about lifecycle management, about being able to automate a lot of these steps, bring them together, do a lot of engineering in terms of balances and checks and keeping that infrastructure in a stable state that was able to move with the updates that were coming out for the various hypervisors, right? And we've learned a lot of that, even more so in the world of Azure Local, because it updates at a far faster cadence than any other hypervisors, as you would expect, being a cloud and a hybrid connected offering, right? However, where we are now is, like I said at the beginning, we've had a few things happen in the market. We've got hypervisor uncertainty, we have the supply chain and components and price increases, etc. And so, 3-tier or disaggregated has its benefits there as well. But we don't want to lose any of that goodness that we've built over the last 10, 16 years in hyperconverged. And so we're not going to do that. We've brought all of that with us, with infrastructure as code, with blueprints. We're still doing all the same testing in the background from a co-engineer perspective. We're just bringing it in a different way that allows customers a lot more flexibility and allows them to gain efficiencies as well, and kind of protect those hardware investments, right? Because it's not cheap these days. And so we want to make sure that we are protecting them and that you have comfort in knowing that they're going to be able to serve you and change with you should you need to in the future. And that is the Dell piece. There's a lot going on.
Great. Thank you so much for that. It was much appreciated, at least a really concise, helping us get an understanding of the Dell landscape. So the final bit really is focused on helping you translate what the real world looks like when it comes to outcomes. And I don't want to do any type of disservice to my esteemed colleagues from Microsoft or Dell. They are fantastic partners to work with. However, they are both partner-led companies, and they do invest significantly in organizations like Jungle to help interpret your specific needs, especially in the small and mid-size area. If you're less than 5,000 seats, it's a different conversation. If you're less than 2,500 seats, it's a slightly different conversation. And that's our area of expertise, being able to translate what's right for you using vendors like Microsoft and Dell, who seem very out of reach sometimes because of the size, but you can see how well integrated they are with Jungle. So I just wanted to make that point. Moving on. I'm going to state the obvious here. Again, I'm here to translate the reality, and is as long as we make sure not everything needs to go into the cloud, not everything needs to remain on premise, there is a middle ground, and it's our job to help you interpret where the right workload sits by getting under the skin of your organization. Really, that's what we're here to do, is understand your core business objectives and align those business objectives to your technology needs, and that's what we're focused on. And when I talk about those scenarios, you might already be in Azure and you need to know how to scale that, but there are some components of your infrastructure that must remain on-prem. You might only be on-premise and thinking about taking the first step into cloud, but actually have some concerns about control and data residency. So that what we're here to do is really help you match the model to the specific business need. Moving on. And what I really like each of you to do is to ask yourselves some key questions, and I always start with these four, is where should that workload live, and really trying to scratch up under the surface and see what the reasoning behind that is, where it's most appropriate. I don't think everything belongs in one location, so finding the right location and the right platform for your workload. And really what I want to focus on, and I will do this on a further slide, is what about the data sovereignty question? What are your obligations? And occasionally, look, I'm being honest and frank here, there sometimes is a misunderstanding of your data sovereignty and compliance requirements, and we're here to help you translate that. There are occasions where you might think if you work for the MOD, if you have contracts with the MOD, you can't put anything in the cloud, whereas the MOD Digital have a cloud-first approach. So it's helping you understand and interpret that. But we really want to respect those data sovereignty rules you want to follow. And ultimately, what's that business trying to achieve? We're, Darren and Lisa talked about performance and security earlier. It's making sure we make sure those objectives are reached with the technology you use. And then finally, sometimes, especially if you're in Azure or the cloud already, bringing some of those workloads back on premise or in a hybrid mode, you're taking ownership again of management that you had handed over. So it's helping you prepare for that and making sure you're operationally ready. Moving on. This is an area I don't want to labor too much, but I think it's critical. Understanding your sovereignty and security requirements must come first. Once we have clarity in that understanding, we can then take you through a journey of picking the right solution and the right workload being placed in the right platform. And once we are able to understand that, we can guide you in where Azure Local fits specifically for you. Moving on. Again, talking about once you make a decision to bring workloads back on premise or move to a hybrid environment, there are governance considerations. What does the end user experience look like? If we pick on AVD, I think Darren mentioned it earlier. It's a great tool for Azure Local specifically, but that end user experience might change from the VMware solution or the Citrix solution or the remote desktop solution you had previously. So ensuring you've got a key adoption program, end users are informed, key stakeholders are bought in is a key component, and we've built an adoption program that helps you manage that change and educate and enables the end users. And really, how do then you manage and support that infrastructure? And at Jungle, we have a great managed services offering, and really be able to understand your needs internally, what capability you have, and share that responsibility. Some hard-won lessons, I like to call them battle scars. From deploying these solutions in real life, what we've learned is really, you've got to design for the end game. Lisa will confirm, the clusters are defined and the nodes must match. Was there any update on this, Lisa, or are you saying that is still the case?
Still the case. So Microsoft state that all your nodes need to be homogeneous. So same generation, same CPU. Even in a disaggregated deployment of Azure Local, still the same, that your compute nodes need to be the same. However, that does mean that you could create additional compute clusters with newer versions and attach to the same shared storage.
Oh,
so it does provide a little bit of flexibility in that, but it stays the same. Nodes must be homogeneous from a Microsoft perspective.
Okay, great, thank you very much. And then again, we learned this while going through a number of these deployments, backing up first and size it generously. We had a problem where we had a power cut mid migration, and one of our key steps is to make sure we have a backup right at the start. It seems like 101, but it's important we go through those steps. So make sure that's done right at the start. Protect power and connectivity. Make sure that's up to scratch. The needs of these nodes are more than a standard server, and we've also done a deployment where there's a power outage. It feels like we got all the worst ones, and what actually happened was that power outage meant that the primary nodes were offline for over 30 days, and that meant they completely disconnected and had to be rebuilt. So just helping you understand from our experience how we can mitigate those risks for you and help you be prepared. It's not a major one, the next one, but it is to be considered. There is a feature lag versus Azure and Azure Local, as you can expect. The majority of features are there quickly, but some of the nuanced features sometimes lag behind, and so it's important to consider the Azure Local roadmap and have a read of that. And finally, brutally honest, this is it's a significant investment, so therefore justification should be really made on control, not on cost. You really need to know this is what you require from a security, data sovereignty, or business outcomes perspective. So really helping you build that case beforehand is what we can really help with. And finally, just some takeaways. I know it sounds obvious, but really start with business outcomes. It's easy to get excited about the technologies, but let's map the business outcomes to your specific need and align the technology then. Understand in detail the data sovereignty and security needs. Don't just take it on the face of any documentation you've read. Speak to the relevant legal departments and really push them for and test and challenge their answers. Work closely with partners like Jungle to make sure the right workload goes in the right place. We're a multi-vendor organization. We work very closely with Dell and Microsoft, but there are other places workloads can go that might be more suited. And finally, plan for that operational reality. It's not just about architecture, it's about what's going to happen afterwards. So the adoption piece, the end user adoption piece, and what it means from a management perspective. And finally, use it where it solves a genuine problem or enables your business. It makes you better as a business, rather than just because it's a new shiny thing. So they're my final thoughts. And that brings the webinar to a conclusion. I'd like to open the floor for any questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. If there aren't any, we will be wrapping up and making this recording available to anyone who wants it. We'll make it publicly available. Rebecca, could you just confirm, how will it be shared, and will it be available on other platforms?
Yes, so anyone that's signed up, they'll receive the recording after this webinar, and we'll make sure to host it and send it across in a follow-up email as well.
Okay, great, fantastic. Just checking for questions. Well, looks like we might have answered them all on the presentations, so we don't have any. I just want to give a special thanks to Darren and Lisa. You've been fantastic. Thank you very much for joining and highlighting the key capabilities within the Azure local platforms and how we can work as partners from a platform, infrastructure, and service delivery perspective.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.